Okay, so I think it's safe to say that the minute Battlefield 2042 is a bit of a hit and miss sort of game. Some people are liking it, some people are disliking it, but that's not the point of this video. The point of this video is pretty much to say, is Battlefield 4 still the best Battlefield game to this day? Personally, I think it's the best Battlefield game. I'm going to go over why I think it's the best Battlefield game, and I'm pretty much going to say the cons and issues that Battlefield 2042 has to do to pretty much get to the level of love pretty much that Battlefield 4 got. So just starting off, with the basics at the beginning. When Battlefield 4 was released, it had a similar situation to Battlefield 2042 in that the game was pretty much lambasted with bugs. People who were playing on PC had constant crashes, couldn't connect to online matches whatsoever. Console, had server issues as well, but overall, it just wasn't a healthy launch at all. And I think the real issue is that they pretty much weren't ready for a game that had to come out on two platforms, because if you remember way back in 2013, what happened was that when Battlefield 4 was getting released, that was sort of the peak of where the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360 were starting to pan off. They were done at this point, and what was happening was around the corner we had the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One all ready to come out, and they were pretty much having to make a game for not three platforms, Xbox, PC, and console, like there were Xbox as console. Xbox, PC, and PlayStation 3. They seem to having to make a game for 5 platforms: PC, PS4, PS3, Xbox One, and Xbox 360. 5 platforms, which is not an easy feat. But the point is that the game did come out. Now the game, like I said, came out in a bit of a rough state. No one was really sure, if they liked this game. Everyone was sort of like, it needs work, it needs add-ons, it needs fixed. This is a nightmare. And I think a lot of people were also a bit burned and annoyed at the fact that a year prior to this, EA released a heavily unfinished Medal of Honor Warfighter. We're not going to talk too much into that because I just don't see the point of talking about that. But the fact that Battlefield 4 came out in a really terrible state a year after a game EA released, Medal of Honor, was not ready to be released. I think a lot of people got cold feet and were pretty much looking at EA like, okay, as a company, you guys clearly don't care about the consumer. You don't care about, the audience, the core fan base that's going to make this game a great game at the end of the day. A fan base that pretty much wants a game that's going to excel and be the game that they pretty much just want to play constant. This is something that EA clearly has a record of showing that they don't care. And I think when Battlefield 2042 came out, is that EA looked at the core elements of Battlefield to saw what worked, what didn't work, and they decided the majority of the fan base wanted a modern day setting game. So EA pretty much said, we'll listen to the fans, we'll give the fans what they want, a modern day setting game, that way everyone wins. However, the problem was, is like most FPS games when it comes to EA, it was just rushed out the door way before it was ready. Now, my biggest concern with Battlefield 2042 was the fact that, I always said this, the fact that they were holding off showing us anything at like Gamescom or anything like that was really a big red flag for everyone, so it was. And realistically, I just didn't understand why EA would choose to release the game if it wasn't ready. The game even got delayed by a month just to appease them and help them out a bit, but it didn't make any difference whatsoever. Now the problem is that when you compare the two, EA were pretty much comparing Battlefield 4 and 2042. If you compare the two from the basis of the launch for both of them was bad. Battlefield 2042 is actually a more stable game, I think, and that you can actually play the game, so you can on all platforms. The problem being is that it's just too big at this point. There's a lot of like overpowered weapons. The community isn't really loving the whole new size of the playlist. Hence why they've actually brought in a standard old 64 player conquest mode, which I've been actually playing quite a bit of. Obviously here you see this is just standard TDM Battlefield 4 stuff. I just needed something for the background to talk about this. Whereas Battlefield 4 upon launch, you couldn't actually play it. It was in a state where you couldn't play it. It was only until Ripple Effect Studios, who are now, well, who actually are Ripple Effect now, but they were known as Dice LA back then. They went in and they actually fixed the game, so they did from the basis. Battlefield 4 was a mess. They, added DLC, they added, updates here and there, patches here and there. And overall, they actually made the game an enjoyable game and made the game a functional game that could actually be played and enjoyed. The problem is, however, is that it took a couple months for Battlefield 4 to get to the state where people actually regard it now probably as the best Battlefield game we've actually had since 2013. Which, now I know a lot of people will argue and say, Battlefield 3 is the best one, Battlefield 4 is the best one. It really is head and head with those two, neck and neck, on which one is actually a better game. For me personally, I didn't play a lot of Battlefield 3, I'll just be honest. I was always on Call of Duty at this point. Modern Warfare 3 for me was my game, and I pretty much played that instead of Battlefield 3. Now I did play the campaign of Battlefield 3, I have to say. I played the campaign, I actually really liked the campaign, but overall I just didn't get that much engagement with the multiplayer aspect. And I think the reason is that the game itself, if you actually played it back on 2011 when it came out, the control layout was very different, whereas now Battlefield's control, if you're a console player, is identical. All FPS games pretty much have the same layout that they've all taken, and it just makes sense. So it does, and I actually think it's actually a smart idea to do that. Getting sidetracked. So, my first proper Battlefield game was Battlefield 4. So that was a game I spent most time on, so it was if you look at the Battlefield games. I didn't really like Battlefield 1. Battlefield 5, I think I put like 2 minutes in, if I'm being honest. And Battlefield 2042. I've actually put quite a bit of time into 2042 with the beta and with the actual final initial game. My biggest concern here is also the fact that EA have said there's not going to be any updates for Battlefield 2042 until at least March. Now, the problem is, Battlefield 4, whenever it launched, it had updates relatively quick. I'd like to say, I mean, after a couple of weeks, players were able to play the game, people were actually enjoying it at that point. The problem is, Battlefield 2042 is still in the situation that it's got constant feedback, negative feedback from communities. People are not happy about the game, and honestly, I can't really blame them at the end of the day. Because it really does seem like at this point, EA just isn't listening to anything that community says. If the community wants an update here or there, needs an update here or there, EA is just blatantly ignoring them. And the fact that we're having to wait till March before we get any add-ons is also a bit of a worrying sign, mainly because that'll be the big, like, massive patch. Usually when add-ons and DLC is all released, what generally ends up happening is that the companies end up releasing a patch to come along with it, sort of to prevent any issues here and there. The fact that that'll be realistically the big patch is a worrying sign, because if you look at the likes of, let's say again, I don't want to keep bringing it up, but if we look at Medal of Honor Warfighter, that game got a patch in December, and that was to go inside with the Zero Dark Friday map pack. That was a big patch, should have fixed it, it didn't. And when that map pack pretty much went about, it didn't do anything for the game. The community didn't really like it, there was a lot of glitches still, and ultimately that game just wasn't a finished ready product. The problem here is that that was a massive patch that came out with it, and there were still bugs. Battlefield 2042 is at the stage where it needs constant patches, because as much as I do actually think it's an okay game, I have to say Battlefield 4 is the better game in basis of how it is at the minute. Like, if we compare the first launch of Battlefield 4 to the launch of 2042, I do think Battlefield 2042 is in a worse situation, and it shouldn't actually be with all the, you know, marketing ability and what we can do now with games. It shouldn't be like that. So the basis of the video, I mean, I probably named it wrongly by saying Battlefield 4 is it still the best game in the Battlefield series. I probably named it wrong. It's probably, this video should probably be called more of a Battlefield 2042 versus Battlefield 4. And realistically, I don't want to have to rename it that, but I just think it's poignant to say that Battlefield 4 is actually still, technically speaking, the best Battlefield game, mainly because there was more weapon variety at the beginning, there was more camouflages, there was more stuff you could do within the actual soldier customization. And overall, I think Battlefield 2042 is really lacking a lot of the stuff that made Battlefield 4 that good. For instance, we have a selection of weapons to choose from. It's nowhere near that level now. I don't know if EA and DICE are going to add more weapons throughout the life cycle of Battlefield 2042. I would like to think they would, because realistically at this point it's a real shell of a game. And I think it's really bad because at the same time it shows the lack of, you know, feedback and the lack of communication between developer and community. Because at the end of the day, as much as the developer likes to brush the community under the table and say, well, they don't matter, at the end of the day, the community is the people who actually make the game successful at the end of the day. So to not have that sort of, you know, feedback or communication between the developers and the company themselves is a bit of an issue when it comes to the community, because the community just wants a game that they can actually sit down and enjoy, and realistically with it at the minute they're not getting it. So Battlefield 4 for me personally is the better game based off everything I've listed, in the sense of, you know, community feedback. They actually have the community testing service with Battlefield 4 as well. Battlefield 2042 does not have anything like that as far as I'm aware. If I'm wrong, feel free to comment and let me know if they do, but I don't think they do. So there's that. There's also the fact that there was just more variety with Battlefield 4, you know, game modes, maps, everything. There was just way more variety and stuff to choose from. Weapons as well. There was just so much more to choose from. EA themselves seemed like they were actually willing to listen to the fans back then, so they, whereas now EA look at it and go, it doesn't really matter what fans think, we just want the money. And it's pretty dangerous and worrying that EA have actually put this game on sale at the minute, which is usually a real red flag. But these are just my thoughts. Is Battlefield 4 still the best game? Personally, I think it is. What do you guys think? If you guys like this video, please feel free to subscribe, like, comment, and overall tell me your own opinions on Battlefield 2042 at the minute, because I think there's loads of potential here for it, but I just don't think that EA is willing to allow the community to give a bit of feedback that they'll take on board with it. But yeah, I've been Recurge, you've been you. If you guys like this video, again, not going to go over it, you know what to do. If you don't like it, obviously leave a dislike. Hopefully you can see something on the channel that you might like and you may want to stick around. I've been Recurge, you've been you. Have a nice day, guys. Peace.